Thanos is dead. Well, at least we think so. Whatever the case may be, he's dead for now, and everyone is talking about the next big bad in the MCU. There are countless great villains that could be the next Thanos, but there's one villain that everyone wants to see following Avengers Endgame. Of course, we're talking about Kang the Conqueror, but how Kang could join the MCU and what version of the villain will we actually see? Well, we got some ideas about that. At this point, we all know how the mechanism of time travel works in the MCU. Well, sort of. If we're being honest, it's incredibly confusing, and with Captain America's ending, we can't say that we 100% understand it. But Smart Hulk, or Professor Hulk, or whatever you want to call him, made one thing very clear. When you go back in time, you can't actually change your own past, but instead you create a new timeline with an alternative future, and we believe that following Avengers Endgame, there are now multiple timelines in the MCU. Marvel fans know that you can't really talk about time travel without talking about one of the most powerful and complex villains in Marvel Comics, and that, of course, is Kang the Conqueror. The so-called Genghis Khan of time travel, Kang the Conqueror is a fascinating character. Kang lives outside of the regular time stream, and he exists in both the past, present, and the future. In fact, there are countless versions of Kang in different timelines. Many of them are completely different from one another. Not only are there multiple Kangs, but many times these different versions end up clashing with one another. Since Kang can be a bit confusing, before we explain how Avengers Endgame sets him up, let's briefly touch on who Kang the Conqueror really is, and what it means for the MCU. While he might look like a blue Thanos, Kang is actually a human from the 31st century. His real name is Nathaniel Richards, and if that name sounds familiar, that's because Kang is a descendant of Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four. Nathaniel was somewhat of a history buff, and that fascination led him to discover time travel technology that was created by Dr. Doom. By the way, there are some versions of Kang that indicate his ancestor was actually Dr. Doom and not Mr. Fantastic. Yeah, like we said, Kang can be a little confusing. Nathaniel started jumping across time and space, and his journey took him to both the past, present, and the future. Nathaniel had multiple identities in his travels, from an ancient Egypt pharaoh to a ruler of a 40th century galactic empire. As you can all clearly see, Kang the Conqueror and time travel pretty much go hand in hand. So it's a no-brainer that all the time traveling in Endgame may very well set up Kang's eventual arrival in the MCU. We believe that, in Endgame, the Avengers ended up creating multiple new timelines following their mission to steal the Infinity Stones from various points in the past. As it was explained in the movie, changing the past creates new timelines, and we believe that no matter what, after Endgame, there are now multiple branching timelines in the MCU, each with a very different present and future. The Avengers removed the Infinity Stones from multiple points in the past, something that can cause serious ramifications to the changed timelines. Take the 1970 timeline, for example, where the Space Stone is now missing. When you really think about it, the Tesseract played a major role in the MCU, and it's what led to the Avengers assembling for the first time in 2012. The stone also had a big impact on S.H.I.E.L.D., and of course it's what gave Captain Marvel her powers. With the Space Stone removed from this timeline, who knows how it could affect the future? For all we know, the Avengers will never assemble, and Earth might be a very different place in the future. It'll be interesting if the actions of the Avengers in Endgame will end up affecting the future that Kang comes from. Kang sees time as his domain, and having the Avengers mess with it could very well lead to a clash between the conquering villain and the heroes. However, we hope to see more depth for Kang when we see him in the movies. We think that the age of generic villains in the MCU is over. Thanos, Loki, and Eric Killmonger were great characters with compelling stories and motivations. They weren't evil just for the sake of the plot having a bad guy that the heroes must stop. Having interesting villains results in far more natural and compelling stories. And we sure hope that the MCU will do the same with Kang. Kang the Conqueror has many intriguing and complex stories in the comics, and many of them connect to another character, the love of his life, Ravonna. We won't get too much into their super convoluted relationship, since like most things with Kang, it's very complicated. We'll just say that Kang fell hard for Ravonna, a princess from the 40th century who at first didn't return his love and even hated him. One thing led to another, and eventually Ravonna sacrificed her own life to save Kang. Yeah, it's not your typical Disney love story, but Ravonna ended up making Kang feel far more complex and interesting than your usual bad guy. Kang went above and beyond to save Ravonna's life, even if it meant doing some really messed up things along the way. We think it'll be great if the MCU takes some notes from the animated show The Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, when they bring Kang to the big screen. In that story, Kang's timeline is being erased following a temporal anomaly caused by Captain America. This leads to Ravonna going into a coma after the timeline gets erased. In the show, Kang's motivations are interesting, since he tries to save his timeline and the woman he loves, leading to a clash with the Avengers. What if the actions of the Avengers in Endgame seriously messed up Kang's timeline? The Avengers had no choice but to find a way to undo the snap, and from their point of view, removing the stones and possibly creating new timelines is a cost that had to be paid in order to bring back all those who were lost in the decimation. This could lead to a clash of ideals, as this choice by the Avengers puts Kang's timeline at risk, along with Ravonna's life. To add to this, Marvel could use some elements from the comics, where Kang decided to preserve the time stream and prevent others from manipulating it, including other versions of Kang himself. A combination of these stories could really make Kang feel like a truly great villain in the MCU. This might not be a faithful adaptation of the character from the comics, but it's not uncommon for the MCU to adjust characters to work better with their movies. After all, in the comics, Thanos doesn't want to restore balance to the universe because he thinks it'll save it. Oh no! He wipes out half of all life in the universe because he has a crush on Lady Death, and he hopes all this death and destruction is gonna impress her. The things you do for love, huh? After the success that Marvel Studios had with Thanos, Loki, and Eric Killmonger, we think it'll be a step back if the MCU doesn't give us more relatable villains. And let's be honest, a villain that clashes with the Avengers in order to save his own timeline and the life of the woman he loves is a really fascinating and different story from what we usually get in superhero movies. While Ravonna is crucial for Kang's stories, we can't ignore the other woman that Kang dated. At some point in the comics, a version of Kang goes back in time to marry Mantis from the Guardians of the Galaxy. It turns out that Mantis is far more powerful than anyone thought, and she's actually the celestial Madonna. Unfortunately, in the MCU, Mantis is presented as a weak woman that seems like she's mostly there so that Drax can make fun of her. It's a shame, because in the comics, she's a powerful, independent person who can really kick some butt and has some great stories. Maybe the addition of Kang in the MCU will help give Mantis some justice and show that she's more than just a comic relief character. Following Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, some fans have theorized that Mantis might be hiding something, and that she's actually the daughter of Ego, like Star-Lord. Since Ego was a Celestial himself, it actually has a comic book precedent with the whole Celestial Madonna thing, and it could give Mantis a far more important role. It's possible that Marvel Studios will mix the character of Ravonna with Mantis, and have her be the reason why Kang ends up clashing with the Avengers. Another version of Kang that Endgame might set up is Iron Lad. Remember us talking about how Nathaniel Richards started traveling through time and ended up becoming Kang? Well, at some point, future Kang travels back in time to save his younger self from a vicious attack by some bullies, an attack that impacted much of his life. Kang hopes to help his younger self become a more powerful version of himself. But young Nathaniel Richards rejects the idea, and he travels to the present where he eventually becomes Iron Lad and forms the Young Avengers. Iron Lad actually ends up being in a romantic relationship with Scott Lang's daughter, Cassie, who becomes the hero known as Stature. We might very well see a version of this in the MCU. In Endgame, we found out that 5 years have passed following the decimation, and Scott Lang finds out that his young daughter has grown up a lot while he was stuck in the quantum realm. This, of course, sets the stage for her becoming Stature in the next Ant-Man film, which could eventually lead to a Young Avengers movie, but how does that connect to Kang and Iron Lad? Remember that mystery kid at Tony Stark's funeral in Endgame who was standing all alone? Well, at this point, you all know that it's the kid from Iron Man 3, Harley Keener. What if the MCU pulls the rug out from under us and reveals that Harley Keener is actually Iron Lad, who's of course the young Kang from the future? Harley Keener could be the fake identity of Nathaniel Richards. There's a connection between Tony and Harley, and it seemed like Iron Man 3 was setting up something big for the kid. While in a way it'll go against the comics, we think that it could be a great turn of events. It'll make sense if there's a connection between young Kang and Tony Stark. As you can see, there's so much potential for Kang the Conqueror in the MCU. As we said earlier, he's considered to be the descendant of Reed Richards, something that could help establish the Fantastic Four in the MCU. Also, not only is Kang possibly the descendant of Doctor Doom, but early in his time-traveling journey, Kang ended up being inspired by him. Of course, this may lead to the introduction of Doctor Doom in the MCU, something we all want to see since Doctor Doom is one of the best villains Marvel has to offer. Kang could also help set up the X-Men in the MCU, since he spent some time in ancient Egypt where he became Rama-Tut, and he planned to take En-Sabah-Nur under his wing. En-Sabah-Nur is considered to be the world's first mutant who eventually becomes the X-Men villain Apocalypse. Kang the Conqueror connects with so many stories in Marvel's comics, so now that Marvel Studios has the rights to his character, it's only a matter of time until we see him conquering the MCU. Do you think we're going to see Kang in Phase 4 of the MCU? And how do you think he should be introduced? Let us know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, we'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe to CBR. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one.